I did not include the portions where law enforcement removed Mr. Brown from the car. I did not think that there was any journalistic need for that. It's clearly, he's clearly in a lifeless position. Yes, sir, in the back. No, sir, I have not. The FBI sent a letter to my office very early on requesting body cam videos. I believe that I know that they have them. They did not get them from me. Sorry, right here in the middle.
While the custom bank officers were shooting forward around the car, obviously his car got very close to the alarm fan. For the shots fired by the sheriff deputies, everybody in the other law enforcement officer on the alarm fan.
He's clearly in front of that car. The body cam, because of the lens, actually distorts the distance between the officers and the vehicle as the shooting. It's really not that far away. Were they really in danger? No. Were they in the path of bullets? Yes.
Fire, fatal headshot, killed Andrew Brown, and how far away that officer was at which angle?
I do not know that. Let me explain why. The bullet that was removed by Dr. Kelly from the back of Andrew Brown's head fragmented. So what that means, according to Dr. Kelly, is that the bullet was tumbling when it struck Mr. Brown. It was tumbling because it was knocked off his path either by a headrest, glass, or some other object inside the car. When it tumbled and hit Mr. Brown in the back of the head, it then splintered into 3 pieces, making it impossible to determine from what weapon it was actually fired. Now, a metallurgic study could possibly figure that out. It's not relevant to my decision, and I didn't need that information.
If you're just joining us, it's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. This is the prosecutor in the Andrew Brown case giving a press conference in Elizabeth City, North Carolina.
So once again, I believe at this point we're discussing hypotheticals or theoreticals. Mr. Brown's vehicle shows multiple shots into the side of the vehicle. There is the one shot in the front windshield that came from Sergeant Meads, and then there's several in the back windshield as the car is moving away. So there are several shots into the body of the vehicle itself from a very close distance. One could think that that was to disable the vehicle. Was that question asked? It's not in the officer's notes. It's not in there about what they were trying to do other than extinguish a threat. No, ma'am. And that file within my office will stay within my office. That is our policy. I do not release any files because they're not public record, and that is our stated policy here. I'm doing this only because of the obvious notoriety of this particular case. Man in the back.
So at what point did you determine that he was using the vehicle as isolated? Was it when the deputy's arm was on the hood of the car, or when he put the car to the garage?
You're asking me at what point did I make that determination?
Yeah.
So once again, the standard of what I need to look at is what a reasonable officer on the scene would have perceived. Not necessarily what District Attorney Andrew Womble would have perceived. But I'm going to answer your question. The question is, when do I think he employed the vehicle as a deadly weapon? I believe he employed it as a deadly weapon the moment he did not respond to officers' commands to show them his hands and get out of the car. When he used the car in contravention of their commands, at that point he has demonstrated his willingness to use that vehicle in any manner he deems necessary to evade lawful arrest.
I think that for us in the national, this case, especially highlighted North Carolina law and body. I think it's also fair to say that video evidence has kind of changed law enforcement and kind of able to examine cases. I wanted to see your perspective on the North Carolina law regarding release of body cameras. Was it useful for your office in this case? Was it useful at all? Would you like to see any changes?
You know, this was the first opportunity that I've had to deal with this particular body cam statute. For the purposes of the district attorney's office and what my duties are in all investigations, all criminal investigations, I found the statute to be very useful, very purposefully written, very useful. It gives an opportunity for anyone who's depicted to have an opportunity to view that, and I think that is important. Could that have been done earlier? Possibly, but once again, the statute dictates how petitions are to be filed and requests are to be filed and how they're supposed to be made. I'm not going to get into whether that was done early on and in the right manner in order to allow the sheriff to make that early disclosure to the family. But with respect to criminal investigations, my job, and as I stated, it is of the highest importance. I have to protect the orderly administration of justice in all cases, and that's mass murders, that's whether it's law enforcement being investigated, that's sexual assault cases, that's breaking and entering and petty larceny, and it doesn't matter. So that is my job, and I take it very seriously, and that is why I took the position that I took with regard to this, and I will take it in every instance that involves body cameras or other law enforcement cameras. I want to see it. I want to conduct my investigation. I want it done correctly, without taint, without the possibility that other people have seen it and are now going to interject things that we cannot objectively verify in. I want that investigation done properly.
I think something
That protects everybody involved, not only victims, their families, but potentially the people charged.
I think there's a part of your statement that you don't necessarily want to see have the sunlight come from these kind of events to the public. If your state, not necessarily, but the public to see these law events and make their own determinations. Like,
I'm not following. You're attributing something to me. What did you say?
Some people might feel that what you just said is that you may not necessarily want the sunlight to open up these videos to be out in the public place for an individual like yourself that is in determination to once they've done their investigation. Am I attributing what you say wrong, or?
No, I think that is correct. I think I brought it today for the purposes of accountability and transparency. I think, as I said before, and I believe I said this at the hearing, you will get an opportunity to see it. The public has a right to see it. Our courts are open. Our Constitution says that the courts in this state are open. So in one of two ways, this would have been exposed. Either I would have exposed it in a court while at trial, and you would have had to wait, or I can expose it today because I'm not bringing any criminal charges. Hold on one second. I'll come right back to you, I promise. I cannot clarify whether there are any injuries sustained. I do not know that. Deputy Lunsford was struck. From the video, it looks clear to me he struck up the entire left side of his body. I cannot tell, and it does not indicate in his statement whether the car rolled over his foot. He clearly yells. You hear him yell when the handle is snatched out of his hand. He loses his balance. That is correct. That is correct. He struck up the left side of his body, and he moves his left leg out of the way. And yes, his upper body is pulled across the hood of the car. No. The second physical contact is when the car is moving forward. Deputy Lunsford then puts out his left hand to brace himself and spins his left leg again up and around to get out of the way. I come back to this one.
Mr. Arnold, you talked about the relationship with the attorneys for Andrew Brown's family. You talk about regarding difficult. You have to say you have to be careful. What do you mean by that? And you admit that your job is difficult to take on these updates. Why not do more to try to reach out and communicate with those? Because they are speaking to the masses, if you will, but they're not hearing a lot more. So why not talk about that relationship and the problem.
So we had a meeting very early, possibly the second day, maybe April 22nd, with attorneys involved. Okay. After I met with attorneys, they held a press conference and disclosed information that we had had a discussion. It was my belief that that conversation was going to be private between us and we were going to have a working relationship. Once the rules of the game changed, then I knew I had to protect the integrity of the investigation and keep the information that I had within my office. Attorneys in this case who are purporting to represent the family aren't licensed to practice law in this state. So in order to represent someone in the state of North Carolina, you must either be a licensed attorney in this state or admitted pro bono. To my knowledge, there were several attorneys who were purporting to represent members of the family who were not either one of those things, either licensed attorneys or admitted pro bono. So I can't discuss with them. And third, when a person, I have an ethical obligation not to deal with someone that I know is represented by counsel without dealing with counsel. So that put a barrier between myself and the Brown family. One that I think, in all honesty, we could have done a better job to repair that relationship prior to this. And it's unfortunate, and I don't like the way that played out.
Yes, sir. I'm sure it's all the use of force policy.
Yes, it does.
I'm looking at it now. It says shots fired at an individual. Additional consideration of risk and prohibited effective when feasible, that we should take reasonable steps to move out of the path of the vehicle instead of discharging the firearm at the vehicle at the time. Did that play any role into the decision today?
I am aware of it. I have a copy of it, and no, it did not. In the back.
Have you seen other situations where officers were only serve a certain warrant and they let that person go as a situation that's dangerous or they didn't arrest them at that time?
No, right off the top of my head, I cannot.
And why do you not,
I cannot think.
that not part of your decision, so all that's the decision for that?
That's an administrative policy. It's not part of the criminal statute and what I need with respect to determining criminal liability or criminal negligence. That's administrative only. Yes, sir, in the back.
Just to clarify, it's not an obvious question for you, but is anybody not happy with their decision today? Is there any other resource that we have, or is this it?
The ballot box.
What would you say that, you have anything that you'd like to say for the Brown family now, and their representatives now?
I think that would be self-serving to do that right now. I will reach out to the Brown family. I'll have that private conversation if they want to have it. Yes, I'll move around. So
Do you think the videos should be released in their entirety so the public can take a look and make decisions for themselves? Because it's hard to see the snippets and,
in their entirety, no, I do not think they should be released in their entirety. I think they should be released, or I see no problem at this point with them releasing any law enforcement involvement with Mr. Brown. Anything after that, it's really falls under the personnel policy. If it doesn't have any involvement with Mr. Brown, then I think that should be redacted. Let me work my way around. Yes, sir, in the back.
Just want to go back to the moment where you were saying about the care, are stationary, sideways, backwards, but for officers to use deadly force because simply pursuing the vehicle. What is that precedent? What stops lethal force from being used for someone who's not pulling over for a traffic stop or other things like that?
Well, there are three factors that law enforcement should consider when engaged in that. And number one is the severity of the crime at issue. So once again, we've moved from when I was discussing that, we had moved from the facts of this particular case into a theoretical discussion about use of force. So can I foresee an instance in a traffic stop where a person does not obey commands of law enforcement and they were to employ deadly force for the instance, or like, for example, a crash or attempting to maneuver someone's vehicle into a crash? I would call that pretty deadly and they do it all the time. Yes, sir, in the back. Okay, because that particular statute as written deals with a custodian of the record, of which I am not. Okay, I am not a custodian of these records. These records come to me through the custodian's office as part of a criminal investigation. There's a separate statute under our North Carolina Public Records Law at 132 4.1, I think. Nothing in my office is public record. So it is within my discretion at that point to release. I would never release or show or display evidence of a criminal case. So now I'm at the point where there is not a criminal case, and I can do this for the purposes of accountability, transparency, and because of the national notoriety of this particular case. Yes, sir.
A couple of technical questions. One, also moving down to the warrant, obviously, arrest warrant, search warrants for unexecuted, why is that?
The house was in fact, searched is not a right word. The house was entered. It was cased, for lack of a better word, for officer safety, but was never searched. So that search warrant was never executed on the house. The vehicle that Mr. Brown was driving was one of those vehicles subject to the search warrant, so that was brought in here in the police station. Does that answer your question?
The second vehicle that was on the search warrant, was that searched?
It was not.
Why was that vehicle on the warrant?
Seemed a little bit beyond the scope at that point. There obviously wouldn't been any criminal charges brought against Mr. Brown. There wouldn't be any need to search that vehicle.
You said you talked to the judge earlier and made the decision to disclose some of this video. Was that conversation next for a minute?
I'm sorry?
Was that conversation next for a minute?
Yes, it was. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Appreciate you taking the time to answer all our questions.
Sure.
Can I go back to the administrative policy, which you said you didn't consider? But that policy is something that the officers involved should adhere to, right?
For the purposes of their employment with the Pasquotank County Sheriff's Office, you have to ask the sheriff. It's an administrative. I'm just drawing a distinction. I've answered the question, and I just tried to answer it in a different way.
But it's a policy that
It's
they should follow.
It's an administrative policy.
What was the difference? It's a policy. It's a
Okay.
guideline.
Okay.
You don't think that was important?
I didn't use it for my analysis for criminal negligence, is what I said. Criminal negligence is a different standard. Yes, sir. And a half.
What is found in the court and was Brown not caring what they did?
Brown, according to the deputies and the briefing that occurred just prior to the attempted service of the warrants, Brown was not known to carry weapons. That was information that we had received, or they had received, from various sources of information. And there was not a weapon found in the vehicle. There was a couple of baggies with off-white rock-like substance in the car on the driver's side in the door. They had been sent off to the lab. Yes, sir. About So if the Pasquotank policy had explicitly stated we don't shoot into a moving vehicle, unless something, would that have changed my legal analysis as far as the criminal? No, it would not. These deputies, these officers that are involved in this particular case are afforded the same protections as officers in Murphy, in Wilmington, in Raleigh, in Charlotte, anywhere else in the state. And those are the statewide criminal protections of the general statutes and their case law. And that's what I use, not necessarily the Pasquotank. Yes, ma'am, in the back. Thank you. I can't. There were nothing found in the house. The house was not searched. Okay, it was simply for occupants and officer safety, officers going through the house. There were drugs found in the car, and they were wrapped in a baggie and a knot on the driver's side, and they were found in the door on the driver's side. There were another baggie stuffed down his throat or in his throat. I didn't mean to say stuffed. Down his throat, a large, what Dr. Kelly described as very consistent with crystal meth. And then we're waiting on the toxicology reports. To go beyond that is speculation on my part, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just telling you what the facts are. I don't know what the toxicology will say. Yes, sir.
You start shooting for these reports, first was the report, the second is for a person who to arrest or stop a person who could be a deadly weapon. In this instance, are you saying that Mr. Brown is really looking to use his vehicle or because of his charges within the arrest?
Simply because of the use of the vehicle. But your point being that he was dealing heroin and fentanyl on a daily basis that is killing people, that's a point that's not lost on me, and I understand that. But no, just the use of the vehicle on that particular day.
Has no translation in here. The charges that they were trying to arrest on were not under consideration for your analysis of use of deadly force against that.
Once again, there is the Supreme Court in Plymouth set forth various factors that one ought to consider when dealing with these cases. And the very first is the severity of the crime at issue. So it does play into a part.
That email was in his throat.
Yes, sir.
That discovered an autopsy.
It was.
Any explanation given why it took that long to discover that?
I will give you my best explanation, and one that's not included in the report, is because Mr. Brown was clearly deceased on the scene. And
Again, if you're just joining us, this
while they
is
were
the
licensing
prosecutor in the Andrew
applied
Brown
to him,
case holding a press
I don't
conference.
anticipate that he was intubated. I don't know anything about that, so I'm speculating a little bit here. But because of his condition on the scene, it was minimal life-saving efforts performed, which is why they didn't find him.
And if you don't mind, you didn't show more of those life-saving measures at the end. All across the country, people are showing more of these videos, and they're showing how officers attempted to save lives. Did I see any of that?
Yes, when the officers removed Mr. Brown from the vehicle to try to do the life-saving efforts, the location of the wound on Mr. Brown's head is clearly visible. It's disturbing. It's not something that I believe I should broadcast. Mr. Brown expiring at that particular point. For the purposes of my legal analysis, it didn't have any bearing on when they used deadly force, whether they tried to save his life afterwards. So I decided to stop it there because the law enforcement purpose ended at that point, and I just didn't see any reason to subject Mr. Brown's family to having those pictures and images of their loved one on the scene in that condition.
Can I circle back on the characterization? Obviously, the Brown family, protesters in the street, say that what they saw in the drink was an execution. You said there's a lot of falsehoods in the statement. So, how would you characterize what you saw in the video?
I spent 10 minutes trying to characterize what I saw on video. I saw a law enforcement officer approach Mr. Brown and give him commands. I saw Mr. Brown refuse those commands and employ his vehicle to get away. And at that point, put officers' lives in danger. I saw the law enforcement officers fan out around the vehicle to stop all of his ingress or egress and all of his movements. Mr. Brown had one choice, or he had two choices. He could comply or he could try to flee. And when he tried to flee, he put their lives in danger. In this particular instance, I found the officers were simply doing their job and acted reasonably. Thank y'all for your time. I appreciate you coming. That'll conclude. No, sir. That'll conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So you were having some handouts,
I have them right over here. And if you want to leave your email address, I'll be happy to send it to you.
Again, we've been watching a press conference in progress. The prosecutor in the Andrew Brown case saying that the police acted appropriately and there will be no charges. While we're on the live, I want to go ahead and show a couple of other reports. We'll have more on this later on this evening. Again, just wrapping up press conference with the prosecuting attorney in the Andrew Brown case, Elizabeth City, North Carolina, and no charges will be brought against the officers for the killing of Andrew Brown, according to local prosecutors. Again, the FBI is still investigating, and we will have more.
5 police officers in Meriden are recovering after they say a driver rammed into them. Police charge Luis Camacho with reckless driving, assault, and possession of a high-capacity magazine. 2 other people in the car were also arrested, including Miguel Acevedo and a juvenile who has not been identified. Officers say they tried to stop the group during an investigation on North 2nd Street last night. That's when police say Camacho slammed into 3 police cruisers and also hit 2 officers who were walking nearby. 1 officer suffered a concussion, another has a broken foot. The group was eventually caught after police say they got out of the car and tried to run. Coming up on Eyewitness News at 6, what the suspect's family had to say in court today.
New for you right now at 5, the Hartford Police Union is speaking out right now, defending one of its own after a police sergeant was caught on camera hitting a female suspect right in the face. Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Patricia Del Rio has been poring over all the documents in this case today. She's here right now with more from the police union tonight. Patricia, what'd you find out?
Hi, Mark. Well, this is a situation where the altercation was captured on police body cam, and these are the 36 pages of documents reviewing that incident. The police chief says the officer should not have reacted the way he did, but now the police union says they've seen the tape and they believe the officer's actions were justified, and they say law enforcement is under attack. We must warn you, the video is graphic.
I can fight you with my handcuffs, I can fight this with my handcuffs, I can fight that cracker that.
This is the police body cam video of 44-year-old Felicia Jenkins while she was being booked into custody on March 15th. She'd been arrested in a domestic violence incident and charged with breach of peace and trespassing at the home of a former girlfriend. The video is during the booking process where the report says she appears intoxicated and is verbally abusive.
Crackers like this with a.
At one point, she lunges toward a male officer.
Get back, Louie, get back.
Next, Sergeant Guzzi, who is the supervisor, intervenes and orders her to be sent to a padded cell.
I talk supportive.
A use of force investigation was later opened in which Sergeant Guzzi stated, "Fearing that I was about to be attacked by Jenkins, I executed a hard hand control." But the police review found while Jenkins had demonstrated threats towards officers through comments and gestures, 2 officers were physically attempting to control her movement, and 3 other officers were nearby. It found a closed fist punch to the face was unreasonable. Now the police union fighting back in a statement today saying in part, when an officer is assaulted, there is no time for hesitation on the part of the officer. Officers need to act swiftly in order to keep the situation from getting out of control. Sergeant Guzzi could see that the arrestee was getting more aggressive towards his officers and that action needed to be taken before his officers were injured. He used appropriate and minimum force to bring the arrestee under compliance. We spoke to Channel 3 law enforcement expert, retired State Police Lieutenant Paul Vance, who says situations like these are difficult.
It appears as though the accused is upset. She seems like she's getting more upset than she had been during the previous 6 minutes. And it also appears that the officers are doing their best to de-escalate the entire situation.
Ms. Jenkins was later charged with assault on a police officer. Sergeant Guzzi is charged with third-degree assault, which could carry up to a year in prison. He is due in court May 19th. I'm Patricia Del Rio, Channel 3.
Again,
Jonathan, thank you.
one more story.
2 Harris County deputies have been fired just weeks after 2 separate encounters with the public.
One of those interactions was caught on camera. It shows now former deputy Bert Dillo punching a 16-year-old boy while he was being questioned at a gas station.
Right here. Turn around and put your hands behind your back while I beat you. Don't be stupid. What did I tell you?
This video is from back in March. It was obtained by the immigrants' rights group FIEL. The sheriff's office says Dillo violated multiple policies. They're now sharing evidence with the DA's office to see if criminal charges should be.
And now we go internationally. A little video from Russia. Okay, this is the Russian weapon is supposedly unstoppable. It's called a Zyklon hypersonic missile. And the weapon can fly up to 6,100 miles per hour. Again, it's considered hypersonic. It is claimed that the weapon is the preferred choice by Vladimir Putin to target American citizens and cities in the event of a nuclear conflict. Tests of the missile system have been ran so far with 4 firings in March. All 4 of the firings hitting their targets. So, what is going on in?
Huge fire rages at alleged Israeli offshore gas rig near Haifa. Last week, military actions resumed between Israel and the Hamas-Palestinian Islamic Resistance Movement, following clashes in Jerusalem after several local Arab families came under a threat of eviction from their homes. A huge fire broke out at an alleged natural gas rig near the Israeli city of Haifa on Monday evening, according to videos shared by users on Twitter. Israeli media also reported on the incident, saying that a torch was releasing gas, which is not something out of the ordinary. The fire purportedly was caused by a technical malfunction, according to Israeli media and social media reports. No casualties or victims were reported. Users in Twitter shared video reportedly depicting the fire at either the Leviathan or the Tamar gas platform, located on the Mediterranean Sea, near the Haifa coast. No official comment has followed the reports. Local authorities haven't commented on the incident, amid continuing hostilities between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is the de facto ruler of the Gaza Strip, and reports appearing earlier in May suggested that Hamas had attempted to attack the Tamar offshore gas rig.
And
Special correspondent Gallagher Fenwick is in Ramallah. He's at one of those protests, and we can speak to him now. Gallagher, thanks for joining us. Tell us what's happening where you are.
Our last live shot, as you may have seen, was interrupted by live fire. We were literally caught in the crossfire between Palestinians firing live bullets, which is an extremely rare occurrence in the West Bank, and Israeli soldiers. Israeli TV now reporting that some Israeli soldiers who were posted on the hill right behind me were actually wounded in this extremely violent confrontation, which basically unfolded during a few minutes that literally caught this massive crowd out here completely off guard. Very many Palestinians held this day dearly, explaining to us in various interviews we have been conducting up until now that this is a family protest. We saw many people bringing their children here and explaining that the current situation, both in the Gaza Strip and in Jerusalem, has unified Palestinians from the Mediterranean to the Jordan River. But this scene that we saw unfold will have consequences. Which ones? It's obviously very difficult to tell at this point, but this was immediately followed by another rather intense occurrence where Palestinian youths, who up until then had been pelting stones, firebombs, Molotov cocktails at the soldiers who made a brief incursion near their position, then caught a hold of a vehicle and basically extracted the people out of the vehicle and were shouting that these were Israeli police officers or soldiers dressed as Palestinian protesters who were attempting to infiltrate this process. This is a technique which has been in the past used by Israeli forces, indeed, to make arrests in the West Bank, but it's extremely rare to actually witness that. As a journalist, it's of course absolutely impossible at this point to verify the accuracy of the information that was being given to us by these youths who had surrounded that vehicle, were pelting it, prevented it from moving forward, and then proceeded to extract the folks who were in there. So very tense atmosphere out here. This begun as a scene that we have seen unfold very many times in the past with the usual, non-lethal or at times lethal confrontation between soldiers, settlers, and Palestinian youths, with some occurrences of live fire. But this was a genuine battle here between, on the one side, Palestinians and Israelis on the other, in this parts of Ramallah and the occupied West Bank.
Yeah, really tense scenes you're describing to us there that you've been witnessing, Gallagher. We can hear some of the sirens going off in the background. Tell us briefly about these strikes that have also been taking place in the occupied Palestinian territories today. Are these being widely observed?
Yes, absolutely. The mobilization is...
Just to give you an idea what they're talking about, there is a general strike going on from all across Israel. All the Palestinians have gone on strike today, a general strike. They are not working. They're staying home. They're trying to cripple the economy. Imagine in America, if every minority member on one day did not go to work, what would happen to our economy? That is what is happening in Israel at the moment. The Palestinians on a general strike, not working, not going to their jobs, and instead protesting on the streets.
Ramallah, thank you very much indeed for your reporting. Stay safe. Do stay with us throughout the day. We'll be checking in with Gallagher as we keep watching what's happening there in the West Bank, as well as in other parts of Israel and the Palestinian territories. Now at 5 o'clock, 5 police officers in Meriden are recovering after they say a driver ran.
Okay, sorry about that. My cue went back to the start. Okay, so that's what's been going on. I haven't been in chat because I was taking notes and trying to queue up what's coming next. And it's been a hectic morning. Again, we started out in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. We've had our eyes on Elizabeth City all along, and the prosecutor today saying that there will be no charges against the police or against sheriff's deputies, I should say, since it was sheriff's deputies and SWAT that was involved. No charges will be brought as far as in the death of Andrew Brown Jr. Locally. Now the FBI is still in Elizabeth City investigating whether civil rights violations took place in the attempted arrest and killing of Andrew Brown. We've got United Nations, live from the United Nations on the screen at the moment. United Nations has been stopped basically by United States vetoes on any sort of statements other than a call for ceasefire from both sides. So tensions are rising even more in Israel. Again, a general strike underway in Gaza, and reports of I've been reporting for 3 or 4 days now that Syrian-based Iranian missiles were fired into Israel, 3 of them. I've also been reporting that missiles were being fired from Lebanon. And I got a report early this morning that Israeli warplanes actually have flown into Lebanon. So the conflict is not diminishing. The conflict is elevating. And it's time we start looking at what's really going on. And in Gaza, while Hamas is the leadership of Gaza as claimed, it is a proxy for the Iranians, more or less. The Iranians are pulling the strings, if you will, and have been. And we will hear this come out eventually in mainstream media, but it's not hard to put pieces together and determine what's actually going on over in the Middle East. Again, expect over the next coming days at least reports of Iran, Syria, Lebanon, with Russian and Chinese blessings, escalating things in the region. So we're going to stop for now. I will be back on later today with more information. And actually, I want to take one look at one other spot before we end the live, if I can. And okay, this site won't, for some reason, this site won't come up onto the monitor. All right, so we'll go ahead and stop for now. And thank you everybody for watching. It is the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. It's a dark world. Try to be a light. We will be back on. I've got reports on. I've got some stories coming up about this. And I wasn't planning on jumping on so quick, but I got word that they were going to make a decision in Andrew Brown. So we had to get that out. I thank you all for watching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Try to be a blessing. Try to spread some love. It's a dark world. Try to be a light. It's the American Doofus Show. Don't be a doofus. I love you all. We'll be back real soon.